My name's Dan Sturgis. I write a column for Automotive Design and Production magazine. And I was actually trained as an automotive designer, graduated in 1987, worked for General Motors for a while, and have had sort of an interesting path in the world of mobility before we really started talking about mobility. So I've worked in it for quite a while, I think almost over 20 years. Today we're going to talk about design, car in the city. I think the idea of our panel is to hopefully expand your thinking about where we're going into the future, that it's not simply taking cars, like if we look out in the world today with 1.2 billion cars, all of those cars are the size and shape that they are because we own them. And now we're going into a mobility as a service future and the on-demand future, and we're going to have an opportunity to right-size transportation. Vehicles moving in downtown Chicago don't necessarily have to be vehicles that are designed for the freeways, that we're going to be able to design new types of vehicles, and we're going to be able to design our cities in a new way. There's a really interesting man in South America who is an architect who also became a mayor, and he created bus rapid transit, but he says this really great saying, which is, a mobility system is not only a system of transport, it's the whole understanding of a city. So today, we're going to look at some different views of this, starting with our first speaker, which is Kathy Winter from Intel. She's a vice president and general manager of the Automated Driving Solutions division. She's a vice president in the Internet of Things group, and she creates in-car platforms for the automated driving solutions. And she joined Intel recently, 2016, and comes from Delphi, and she was one of the unique automotive news choice for 100 leaders in the North America auto industry in 2015, just recently. But she's a really fantastic woman, an innovator, and a leader. And at Intel, as you probably know, they are very much a part of more than just cars. They're part of the whole Internet of Things. So we wanted her to come and talk about the future of autonomous cars, but also the future of what kind of house or what kind of buildings or offices or what is our world like that we're going into. So please welcome Kathy.
This is the clicker. All right, good morning. Thanks for having me here. This is my first actual event as an Intel spokesperson. I'm very excited to say that. And what I'd like to start off with, since I'm first, is to spend just a few minutes on how we think about the Internet of Things, right? So at Intel, this is something we focus. In fact, we have a huge business centered around the Internet of Things. And don't worry, I'll bring this back to how does the automobile and how does the car fit into it, but just to set the stage. So as you think about it, really, I think most of you probably have a definition of this in your mind, right? It's things out, whether it's in the home, the industry, or in the mobile space, that are now connected. So you started by taking things that are unconnected, connecting them to the network. Then you're taking those things that are connected to the network and making them more sophisticated, adding more software, more content. And then you think of the end state. The end state would be, when is this autonomous? And I'm not just talking about cars, but things in the home, things in the factory, all kinds of places where you can think about the autonomy and autonomous type products would really help everyone's lives be easier, more productive, et cetera. So this is really how we think about it. And you think, well, how can we do that today? Why couldn't we do this 10 years ago or 5 years ago even? And it's really, there's many things that come into this, right? And one of the first things you talk about is the sensors. You actually have to know what's going on in that product. So the sensors, the cost of that, the sophistication and the cost really has come down by more than 2 times over the past 10 years. Well, the other thing you need is bandwidth. If you're going to talk to all these different things, whether, again, a car or your refrigerator or your thermostat, for example, you have to have the bandwidth. And so the cost of that bandwidth and the accessibility across the nation, across the world, down by 40x. And then the third piece is really the processing power. And as an Intel person, of course, we talk a lot about the processing power. So more and more data, more and more things going on in that network, more and more things needing to get up to a cloud somewhere. So the cost of processing, look at that, 60x. So that's why now is really a good time to be thinking about the Internet of Things and why it's applicable. So one of the things we also talk about is what are the big problems we're trying to solve, right? And if you think about it, they really fit into 4 buckets here. You can talk about the aging population. You've got cities growing like crazy. We've got feast and famine, depending on where you are in the world, that needs to be solved. And then we talk about the carbon footprint. And especially if you're out in California, right, I've learned that that is just incredible attention, not just in California, but it brings you to mind when you see placards and signs and the recycling and all these great things that go on all over now. I want to spend a couple minutes on the aging population, because this is one that, well, really hits home personally for me, as I have, I shouldn't say this out loud, but I have elderly parents, they won't admit it. And when I think about what limits their life, and you start thinking about the car and the automobile, that's a very limiting factor. At what point do you take the license away? How can you give this aging population a new sense of freedom, an extended sense of freedom? And so when you think about automated vehicles, it's a safe way for them to really continue with that independence much longer than they might be before. I'll go almost the reverse side too. If you think about the 16-year-old drivers, I can't really not mention that, as having a bunch of teenage sons who are terrible drivers in my own house. So I think this aging, it's at both ends of the spectrum, right? Safer on the road at a young age, safer on the road as we have the aging population. And I saw this interesting statistic this week. And it basically says that by 2050, there will be more people over the age of 60 than there are 14-year-olds. And so that's an interesting stat, right? We've got this aging population. Thank goodness, people are living longer and healthier, but it creates a whole nother set of problems. I'm going to switch gears a little bit. Another driving factor when you think about cities, smart cities, connected cities, is really the fact that we have this huge urban boom going on. It's crazy. And there was another stat about 65 million people going into the cities each year, and it's equivalent of like 10 cities of Chicago. So if you think about it in that way, there's a problem there. You think of the vehicle congestion. There's cities like Singapore, for example, who are very focused on how do we solve this problem? We don't have room for parking garages. We don't have room for cars. We need to solve the logistics, more efficient, et cetera. So this whole concept of mobility on demand, how can people share cars? How can we use them more efficiently? That's where you start to see this is a big way to solve that problem, right? Go to the automated vehicles that let's get them up to 80, 90% utilization instead of most of us have more than one car in our family. And how often, if you really took a look at it, does it sit either in your work parking lot or at your house, right? Nobody's driving it. So I think, that's another big problem, that when you think about why does automated vehicles, why getting these cities instrumented to speak to all the logistics that's needed for that, that's a big area where it's a driving force and it's a problem to solve. The other two, they're interesting. I think the carbon footprint, whenever you have better fuel economy, you're driving better, you're more logistically sound, you're going to be saving in that area as well, right? So those are probably the three biggest ones that hits. So what's the future of mobility? Let's go back to, we need these smart cities. We need the smart cities because we need to know what's going on in the environment. And by instrumenting, and you look at Ann Arbor, for example, I think that's a good example of where getting vehicle-to-vehicle communication, vehicle-to-infrastructure communication, that's a really good example of a smart city, where it's approaching a smart city. It's a good benchmark. And there's other places as well. It's just that one's near and dear to all of us. It's nearby. But when you think about the future of mobility, there's three things to keep it really basic that you need. So you need your thing that's out in the world, the Internet of Things. In this case, it happens to be the car. You need a really great network, whether it's 5G, 4G. I do think 5G for sure. That's the way it's going, and it's coming quickly. 5G network. And then there's the cloud piece. And you think about all the things you're doing in the cloud. So it gets really interesting when you think about what goes on in that communication. So you're taking all this data from the vehicles. You're going to push it through this fantastic bandwidth network up to the cloud. There's a couple things you might be doing. One is looking for problems that are out on the roads. Let's say I see a huge pothole. My vehicle sees a pothole. Send that up. You don't have to have all the other vehicles see that pothole to know it's there. Right? That's a kind of communication that doesn't need to be real time, but it could be. And so training the cars that are out on the network to look out for new scenarios, new things. If a ball rolls, for example, in front of an automated vehicle, it's going to predict, wow, here's what I do. That's a new use case. Here's what I do. If a ball rolls in, there's an 80% chance some little child's going to run in after it. Well, you don't want every car out in the network to have to learn that itself, because that A, takes long, and B, it's not safe. So push that information up the cloud. Use machine learning and train those vehicles back on the network to say, here's a new use case. If you see a ball, 80% chance a small child's going to run out after it, avoid that ball, slow down, go somewhere else, et cetera. So this whole concept of machine learning up in the cloud gets really interesting. The other piece is, what can you do with that data? I mean, there's a chance to monetize that. A lot of discussion. Who owns that data once we get it up there? And so you can almost sit around these tables and talk about endless different applications that you might do if you had all that data. Maybe I'm an insurance company. Maybe I'm a repair and warranty shop that wants to understand vehicle breakdowns in aggregate. And then you just get back to basic. I have an automated vehicle. I want to drive better. I want to learn how to drive better from other cars that are on the road. So that's why you see this endless loop. It's really the back and forth, the passing of that data. And once it's there, you got to use it. There's so many things. So here's the big obvious ticket item. Why do you do this? When you look at the savings, and these estimates have all been out in the industry, but when you put it all on one page, it's pretty staggering, right? So you say, start at the US economy, how much you're going to save. I think the next thing you're looking at is safety. That's probably the number one reason most people are saying, let's get these cities smart, let's get these vehicles up on the road. You see so much work going into that because it really is a safety issue. And the savings is staggering here. You can see $488 billion. It's amazing. Then you look at productivity, the logistics space. So anything that those logistics companies, you could take a UPS, for example, FedEx, can do to get higher utilization, better routes, less idle time, it's a productivity savings. And then I'm going to include, some of us probably do a lot of work in the car if we can get somebody else to drive us. Or if you're on a train, it's pretty easy. But when you're in the car, unless you have somebody else driving and you've got a Wi-Fi hotspot, you're not productive. Maybe, I'm sure most of you are on conference calls, so I'll give you that, but that's also distracting. So we do try to do the best. So you think about productivity savings, I would actually lump in here all of us getting to do work and do things, and whether it's even call home, et cetera, do that while you're in the car. So not having to pay attention to the road and being able to be more productive in your life, and maybe stay at the office a little bit less time. There's an idea, right? So I think most of us get trapped into that. But you look at these numbers here, and it really comes from 3 different places. So it could be the consumers, we're riding now, we're not driving. It could be fleet owners who are more efficient, higher productivity use of the cars. Again, everybody doesn't have their own car. Maybe we're sharing. Maybe there's pools of people owning them, but that really feeds in the productivity and the savings. And then this content delivery. Again, there's this whole business around if you're not driving and you're riding, or it's you and your family, think of all the things that everybody could be doing in that vehicle. And so there's going to, I think we all agree, there's going to be this business that crops up around content. What kinds of things do people do? Is it like an airplane where you just sit and you're going to watch movies, or you do email? Or is there more that could be happening? Because now you have a super fast pipeline in there relative to Wi-Fi today in the airplane. When it's on, it's good, but it's also slow, right? You really can't compare to what we could do in the vehicle. So it really opens the door to opportunity here to say, is there retail? Is there commerce things? Is there online shopping that's just amazing? Endless possibilities. So what do we need to continue to make this happen? I used to talk about this like this is 5 years out, 10 years out, 15 years out. I actually think this is happening now, but what do we need to continue to do to accelerate it, right? We want this to happen fast for all the reasons we talked about. So the infrastructure, the government, the safety regulations, this is a big one that all of us have to pitch in, be a part of this, come up with the right answers, but not be a roadblock to making these things happen. Because in the end, when you look at the dollars, it's so worth it for everyone. So I think that's an obvious one we hear a lot about in the paper today. I think several of us, again, will be involved with this kind of activity. And it's important to keep things moving forward. Second piece, also happening. You can't drive around in many cities anymore in the US or even in Europe that are, and Asia, I guess I should include all 3, really, where you don't see cars out trying this, trying data, trying to drive, trying to push the envelope on what can be done. And so that's an exciting space, whether one of the things, we're of course doing that at Intel, and there's many other players out there as well, and it's advancing the whole industry. That's the beauty of it, right? It's advancing the knowledge base, the data that's out there, and it's learning, collective learning. And then the last piece that we think about a lot at Intel, also, not to be an ad for us, but it's important that you look at all aspects of the network. So it's not just the cars driving, it's how do we all feel about what's going on in the car? Do we feel safe? Do we feel confident? How do you make that user experience something that everybody just starts to take for granted? Oh, we don't have to worry. It's fine. It's safe. I can start doing things. I don't need to be ready to re-engage and grab the wheel any minute in sort of a nervous mode. So getting to that end state and really understanding how people will perceive it and what will make them feel confident and safe is an important piece. So just in summary, I think we are enabling this future, and I think all of these areas are moving, and new ones will come up, I'm sure, next week and the week after, because this space really is undefined. But as we move towards these smart cities and we get things connected, I think the data moving around is going to be amazing, and lots of ways to accelerate this all happening. And like I said, people at this conference, I know you're here for that reason, because you're interested in this space, and so I look forward to working with a lot of you to make this happen. So I think that's it. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Sue Zielinski. She runs a program called SMART at University of Michigan. That stands for Sustainable Mobility Accessibility. Access is actually a very big word. Research Transformation. And she is a leader in the whole space of smart multimodal transportation. She worked for 15 years for the city of Toronto, involved with bicycles and smaller sustainable vehicles. She has, you probably know her because she's been in Ann Arbor, and she's kind of a key supporter for Ford Motor Company and helped that company broaden their view of what mobility is. She works around the planet. We're talking about these sustainable autonomous cars, and they're awesome, but a beautiful day in Chicago and you have to go a mile, a bicycle probably is the best answer of all. And as I said earlier, we're going into, I think, a much more diverse multimodal future, and Sue's worked around the planet to do that. So please welcome Sue Zielinski.
Thank you, Dan. What a nice introduction. So personal. Well, good morning. It's really great to be here. You may wonder about the enchilada. Oh, do I have the clicker, by the way? Oh, yeah, this thing. Oh, how do I? Oh, the red button. Oh, I pressed the green one, right? Okay. Sorry. Yeah, you may wonder about the enchilada, but I'll get to that. I just wanted to sort of reinforce what Dan was saying about SMART. And we're basically a little different. We're a catalyst entity at the university to just basically advance. We work around the world to advance implementation of sustainable transportation systems and the industry and enterprise that's going to supply it. And full disclosure, as Dan said, I'm actually a city planner, and I worked out of the city of Toronto, but I was really just trying to get more sustainable transportation going, but we soon found ourselves challenged by some economic mandates, let's say. And this was in the late 90s. And so I coincidentally sort of started to suspect that this urban mobility thing isn't actually a public cost, because that's how it was seen in those days. Oh yeah, buses are expensive, and no, we'll have to pay the money for the paint for the bike lanes, right? But then, highway investment, and there was a few more dollars going in that direction. So I started to look at it and realize that, it's a huge investment. And to sort of test my suspicion, I commissioned a study, and this was in the late 90s, early 2000s. And it turned out, thanks to Michael Porter, who came around at the same time and looked at industry clusters, and we looked at all the different industries and a tiny little sliver of each industry, like IT and logistics and real estate and everything, and put it all together, and it ended up being in the multi-billions of dollars in the early 2000s, and of course now it's in the multi-trillions, so it's kind of exciting. So what I'm going to do is go a little beyond automotive and bite off the whole enchilada, touch on the design and the implementation and commercialization of mobility systems of systems, and in other words, the whole enchilada. So now, will this work? So we're in a world where we have automotive companies now saying that they're mobility companies and actually acting like they're mobility companies. I guess started off with Ford from what I can see. We also have city governments and national governments opening their data, seeing industry opportunities, not just making their transportation better, but saying, hey, wait a minute, this is going to develop our economy as well, which of course builds an economy that supports a sustainable future of transportation. And then we also have national governments that are doing this. We have a consortium at SMART. We lead a little group of leads from Finland, Scotland, and Sweden, and soon to be a couple of other countries that are basically innovation agencies that invest a lot of matching funding for tier ones and ecosystems of up to 200 startups to move the new mobility industry forward. So this is kind of exciting. The other thing is that obviously the enterprise space is pretty rich. We have something called the Mobi platform, which started out with a prize, a global prize, thanks to the Rockefeller Foundation for new mobility industry and enterprises. And so we give out an award every 2 years to any sort of service, product, technology that is an up and running business that's making money on moving the startup and SME space forward and putting more sustainable transportation systems on the ground. That's a global prize. So the first one we did at Rio Plus 20, we gave that out at Rio Plus 20. The second one was at ITS World Congress in Detroit. Rio Plus 20 was obviously in Rio. And then next week we're giving out the next Mobi Prize, set of Mobi Prizes in Quito, Ecuador at Habitat 3. So we see this interaction between all this, the business and the government and the startup space, and we're looking at how this can all come together, and we've heard that theme coming up. And what we see right now, or what I can sort of see, is that we're really kind of obsessed with the sort of automated vehicles, and the shared use is really getting a lot of attention, and the IT, just understanding that IT is the next transportation infrastructure or parallel infrastructure. And of course electrification is kind of exciting too. But they sort of still remain separate somehow. And as Dan said, this whole mobility as a service thing, I think, is the next wave. It's saying, okay, we're moving from mode to service. We're moving into systems of systems, and how it's all coming together. And the other switch that's, I think, quite profound, it seems really simple, but it's actually focused on the user. So from door to door, you look at the user. You don't look at this system versus that system. It's saying, how do we look at the use case? So this is a really messy slide full of a whole bunch of detail about multimodal, but the gist of it is, what is it going to look like? So, I mean, we don't have to look at all that kind of detail. We can just imagine. Hang on. Now, I'm clicking it. It's supposed to be a video. Any hello up there in the sky? I did click it, but it's not seeming. Hi, Brad. Any, oh no, hang on. Should I click it again? Oh, wait a sec. There we go. So Veolia is sort of like a big, in case you don't know, you probably all know, but it's a big company that does sustainable infrastructure stuff. And they did this video ages ago. We had done a cartoon at the City of Toronto. We had done a cartoon of the day in the life of sustainable mobility door to door. But I think they've done a great job. And this is like about 6 years old. And it's still really good, I think, because it shows what it's actually could be like. And it's getting more and more like this, where our devices are helping us go through from the information point of view, integrated information, wayfinding, fare payment, and then we've got like cloud-based multimodal traffic management, both pushing and pulling. We've got better security. We've got all sorts of sort of digital supports for linking physical modes of transportation, not just having to choose one, but using all sorts, and also being able to link that with goods movement and with moving less. So in other words, that we don't really actually have to be moving all the time. It's not keeping people from moving, but it's saying, well, actually, we can avoid some trips or make them smaller through things like, good urban planning or local production and distribution or urban agriculture. So you've got all these things coming together, and I think this video does a great job at showing that, and the wonderful role of big data, even a little bit of automation, and basic IT. But I think it's missing some boats and some bicycles. When we work around the world, we see all sorts of great things. And again, Dan, you did like the perfect setup, and we didn't even talk about this beforehand, but things like informal transportation is sometimes the most effective because it is on demand and it's really working, it's focusing on the user, it's working on people's needs and going from there as opposed to designing a product and trying to push it out. So it's really interesting to see the dynamic of emerging emerging economy innovation and how exciting that could be to inform how we evolve our systems to really serve a whole range of users, not just car users. So it's pretty seamless. And hearing the Columbus, Ohio story, that sounds like this is going to really happen. We see it a little bit in places like Paris and Seoul, Korea, but not quite there yet. Okay. Oops, oh no, I turned it on again. Uh-oh. There we go. Okay, so why are we doing this? I just wanted to really focus on the fact that we usually say we're doing this because we're all going to die and the world's going to end and climate change and everything, and that's really depressing. It's true that we have to do it, and we are doing it. It's really exciting, but that's not the only reason we're doing it. We're also doing it because we can. We've got all these amazing technologies and new business models and service models and things and even policies to help that happen. We're so beyond the last millennium of heavy infrastructure. We're incorporating it, but we're not dependent on these like big capital funding things, huge public-private partnerships, but really able to do such nimble and innovative ways of moving things forward, building the infrastructures. And also, we're doing it because we want to, and it's hip and cool and sexy for especially the generation that's going to be embracing this and already is, and allowing us to do things on demand when we want it, what we want when we want, on demand, and not having to own a car, but of course can own a car. So it's also because it's, as I mentioned, an industry and enterprise opportunity and a job creator. So I wanted to also touch on the meta phenomena around what informs what kinds of things we design. So we all know that change is changing faster, so it's not just change is happening, but it's exponentially happening. And therefore, technology is outpacing policy, which gives us this huge opportunity to let go of trying to choose the winners and to say, actually, we don't know what we don't know. Therefore, the most important thing, and that also is a theme today, we have to have the ecosystems. We have to build the alliances that allow us to be resilient and together come up with innovations that incorporate all the needs of all of the different users of these new technologies and these new systems. So to me, that's really exciting. And the fact that we're the deciders. So it's often easy to think, oh, well, government policy is going to determine this, or business is going to make these things happen. We have to remember that now, especially because of the diversification, there is so much more agency in this whole field for us to be able to actually create and design in our minds how we want to live. And it's an infinite game. So I don't know if anyone's read James Carse's book about finite and infinite games. So finite games are played with the purpose of winning, and infinite games are played with the purpose of continuing the play. So this goes a little bit against the official plan or the kind of urban planning approach of we're going to make a plan over 3 years and then we're locked in for 20. Instead, we're saying, actually, we're creating the conditions and we're creating the opportunities to continue to evolve. So where does design come in? It's not just designing the car. It's also designing services, products, technologies, and infrastructures. It's also focusing on people, goods, and less. And it's designing the whole system and the whole ecosystem. We have to figure out who we need to be working with, who else should be at the table when we're thinking about these things. So I'm just going to finish with 4 things that SMART does along these lines to put this into reality. So one thing is we work around the world. We wanted to go straight into the economic opportunity and pushing the industry development, but we realized that a lot of the cities, including in the US, weren't kind of focusing so much on the whole system. So we needed, in order to know what the economy or the industry and enterprise of the whole system was, we needed to be implementing the whole systems. So we looked at the disconnect between the entrepreneurs and the CEOs and the city planners and the infrastructure people, and we realized they don't actually talk to each other. And it's not their fault, it's just not their mandate, and there's no link tank to bring it together, but then the user loses out. So we were invited to a lot of cities to focus on this, and we began to develop ecosystems that showed us this pattern. So in a nutshell, what we do is we bring all the players together, the leaders that have a transportation stake. And that's quite broad. It even involves, social service people and beyond the usual suspects. But what we do is we map out everything. We put everything on the same map, including the informal gathering spots, parking lots, highway corridors, airports, ferries, and then we put a red dot where 2 or more things connect. And what that does is it reveals the new mobility grid, and then you can start to see all the use cases of different users, like a senior, someone with disabilities, someone who needs to go across the region to their job. So there's this opportunity to immediately identify new innovations, gaps, things that can be done right away. Hey, we can move this zip car across the road to under the light, so when the person gets off the bus right into the parking lot, they can get straight into the zip car. So all that kind of thing can be immediate, low-hanging fruit, but also giant gaps where development's coming, but you haven't planned for either amenities, transportation amenities, or connectivity between those amenities. So that kind of thing happens. We've seen all sorts of huge things arise from a systems perspective on the ground in India, South Africa, Brazil, the Philippines, all over the place. So we also look at the design side of things, physical design. Right now, we're so obsessed with IT, which is fantastic. I spent a lot of my life saying to my fellow city planners that, wow, information technology is really exciting and can take the place of a lot of things. But now it's kind of going the other way. We're so obsessed with IT that we forget that we have to think about really smart urban design and physical design. So we do a lot of that at the university. This is like our whole team of different collaborators at the university and beyond the university. And of course, I've shown you the Mobi platform. I told you about our MAS consortium of the Nordic visionaries. And then finally, we do a lot of research. Oh, perfect, okay. So the research we do, though, is a little bit, again, across the board. We look at integration models. We look at the design prototypes, as I mentioned, MAS, industry analysis and economic analysis. How are the legacy industries interacting with the disruptive enterprises in physical space? How can we develop in different regions, regional economic development strategies, regional industry plans to move this forward, to put things on the ground, to actually be testing, like in Ann Arbor, testing things on the ground while you're developing opportunities for export, looking at reverse innovation, how do we work with these emerging economies and move the new mobility industry forward. And all this comes from how we design things. And then of course enabling policy, which requires so much more sort of policy participation, but so much more nimbleness. So you kind of need more than the CAFE standards and the basic zoning and land use laws. then you need to get in the social service, energy, IT, innovation, cybersecurity, all that kind of stuff. But when you've got that happening, you can begin to develop policy frameworks. And it doesn't have to be about so many rules, but rather system architectures and opportunities for policy frameworks to move things forward through ecosystems and alliances. I call that public-private innovation rather than public-private partnership. And finally, behavior, attitudes, decision models, and marketing. So basically, how are we thinking about this? How are we relating to our transportation modes? How do we market things? How do we build systems that actually meet people's needs? So it's really important to keep coming back to the human. And we're moving from this notion that our car gives us our identity, and we have the millennials saying, well, we just like our social networks way better, and then looking at, well, how can we create these systems and design them in a way that works for us? So, oops, sorry, these are some of the research things I was supposed to show earlier, but anyway. So yes, I'm going to end off with the idea of the new narratives, the idea that we're all the deciders, we're all the creators. A friend of mine once said to me, isn't it amazing how many things Philip K. Dick predicted? And Philip K. Dick, in case you don't know, is the guy who wrote the book that Blade Runner was based on. And it occurred to me when my friend said that actually he didn't predict those things. He actually created them by telling that story. And so really, in some ways, it's up to us sort of collectively to be creating those stories in order for them to transform into reality, into a future sustainable, integrated, multimodal, amazing industry and business and job opportunity reality. So I'll finish there.
And if you met Sue about 15 years ago, she was thinking the exact same thing. It's amazing, and that the world has come to you. So if you've worked in the mobility space, or before it was called a mobility space, one of the things that I've always been really focused on was cross-disciplinary type of work, working with somebody you didn't know. I was fortunate to work with Dan Sperling at the Institute of Transportation Studies. He's on the California Resources Board, but he called me about 15 years ago, and we started working on some of these new mobility areas as well. And it's just so important to meet people that you don't know. If you're an automotive engineer, meet somebody you don't know, because that's what it's going to take to make all this happen. And in that direction, I'm really excited that Marta Nowak, he's come to talk here, and she's a founding principal at Anonymous, a transdisciplinary design firm. Actually, design firm is on the name. Design. We were talking about design as the name, and back some private discussion, sorry. But she's an amazing architect, and I met her at UCLA, where UCLA has a school of architecture and urban design, their master's program, and it's in Playa Vista, or it has been, where the Spruce Goose was that Howard Hughes built the Spruce Goose plane that flew. And it's a really interesting, great area, great group of people. And so she's a lecturer there and also adjunct professor, and she works with these students on urban design and architecture, and they got the project to do the Hyperloop. And Elon Musk from Tesla came up with the idea of this Hyperloop, this high-speed mode of new travel. And Marta's program said, what would that look like integrating that into Los Angeles? And so there's a whole part, we talk about autonomous cars, but we don't think about how the city's going to be designed differently. So here's a very different person looking at the future of transportation, and I think you'll find her presentation very, very exciting. She's also worked recently with NASA, the Jet Propulsion Lab, on some interesting programs, and she's a Harvard graduate from the School of Design there. Marta, come on up.
Thank you, Dan, for this kind introduction. As Dan said, I am a faculty at UCLA. I teach in a graduate program called Supra Studio. We have our own campus, Ideas, where we generate many ideas. And the program integrates research and design. But I'm also a practicing architect, and as Dan said, I'm a co-founder of a company called Anonymous that focuses and specializes in architecture and urban design. So in 2014, Professor Craig Hodges, David Ross, and myself with 25 students started a journey with Hyperloop at our facilities at IDEAS, a satellite campus of UCLA. We partner up with Hyperloop Transportation Technology on a year-long project that would embody both research and design speculations. The study was triggered by the release of alpha paper done by Elon Musk. And we studied this paper carefully, and we came to a conclusion after studying it that it left us with more questions rather than answers. So we embarked on the journey to research the system of Hyperloop and see its implications on different scales. In the first 10 weeks, we put together this book. It's a 300-page research proposal that I'm going to share some of the findings with you right now. Unfortunately, I don't have the time to go over all of it. But we looked into 4 different areas of study and different scales. So how do you even start thinking about Hyperloop? Well, maybe the first question would be to think what it means to travel with the speed of 760 miles per hour. Well, in 200 BC, it took people 90 days to travel the Silk Road with the horse or a camel. It took, in 1776, it took almost 3 weeks for people to travel across the country with the train. And more recently, it takes us about a day to travel across the globe. So all these amazing modes of mobility that we already have also have some drawbacks, from congestions and traffic to release of carbon and environmental implications, to economy and high prices that we pay for traveling from city to city. So with Hyperloop, you will not only be able to travel with the speed of sound, but you will also be able to pay for your trip less than $30 to go to another city, and leaving a minimal impact on the environment. So what does it mean to connect different cities across the country? Well, what it would mean that all of us right now, we could decide to go to Chicago, grab a sandwich, and come back right here within 1 hour. What it means, it would mean that we could live in Los Angeles and commute 30 minutes to San Francisco, and it would only take us 30 minutes to go there to work and come back in the evening. And of course, this technology has some challenges that we would have to solve, from land availability, G-forces, meandering around the terrain, as well as thinking about it, what impact would it have on natural landscape. We looked later on the urban scale, and similarly we looked at different modes of transportations and how they affected the city and how far you could travel within the city with these new inventions. The concept of travel of 30 minutes would expand with Hyperloop quite dramatically. Within 30 minutes, you would be able to travel to and reach 3 different cities: San Francisco, Las Vegas, and San Diego. But what does it mean for the city to have a station with Hyperloop? Well, one of the biggest questions and challenges would be to solve the concept of last mile. Because if it takes you 40 minutes to get from your home to Hyperloop station and then 30 minutes to go to San Francisco, that means there's something wrong. So the concept of last mile and connections to existing public transportation system would be a key to success of Hyperloop within the city. We did also different speculations on what did that mean, and looked at different proposals. So here's one. We would locate a station at the heart of Los Angeles and connecting it to Union Station, from which you could travel to San Francisco, Las Vegas, and San Diego. But later we will hope that in the next phase we would deploy a mini Hyperloop, which would travel at a little bit lower speeds and connect other neighborhoods to the main stations. And hopefully in the future, entire metro area would be connected with Hyperloop and would allow everyone to actually have access to that transportation system. And of course, station, when we looked at different stations, we analyzed different modes of mobility from bus stations, train stations, and airports. But what it would mean for the station is to work out the flow of passengers. So with Hyperloop, every 30 seconds, one capsule would leave the station. Every 30 seconds. That means that within 30 minutes, we have a 3,000 passenger flow that has to go through that station. So how do you deal with it, and how do you deal with circulations? What kind of programs would be employed to, in this kind of instant a travel system, which would work in a way kind of like a subway station, where you just show up, you get a ticket on the go, and you just get in and hop on the capsule and travel without, you know, more advanced kind of check-in and arranging of your tickets. And of course, the huge problem of dealing with luggage. Could we deploy Kiva robots to solve some of those problems? And we came up with this conclusion that probably for the station operation, it would be best if we could deploy 4 platforms from which the capsule will leave every 30 seconds, and same for arrival. And similarly, on a smaller scale, we look at different capsules from buses, cruise ships, everything. And we looked at the body position and how it would behave in this speed. And we realized that every inch matters. So we look at different propositions, different spacings. We looked at 4 seats, 3 seats, 2 seats. We looked at a question of an aisle. Do we have an aisle or we don't? Do we have a bathroom or we don't? And of course, how do we load people with such a speed? How can we achieve the capsule to leave every 30 seconds? So we looked through these different boarding scenarios that could allow us to board in that kind of speed. And now I'm showing you a video that will show you one of the proposals that the students did. Oh, can we go to the previous video? That's the second video. All right, so maybe we just watch this one and we'll go to the previous one. I also teach a technology seminar where with students we build a full-scale mock-up, one-to-one, and we were experimenting with projection mapping to kind of simulate the environment of Hyperloop and what it means to travel, because the capsule would not have any windows. So we were thinking that maybe the windows would only show up at the station, or we would have to deploy some kind of digital window and projections for the inside. So how do we create this non-claustrophobic environment where people will feel comfortable traveling? And we look at different lighting conditions and digital screens, interactive screens that we could use on the side of the travel. Different conditions for evening commuters versus morning commuters. When we're coming back from work and we would like to relax, versus in the morning, traveling in the morning where the light would be more to wake you up and get you ready for work. So we'll go back and see another video that is going to show more of a capsule and station. So this will be a capsule. We divided the students into different research groups. So they were investigating different type of capsules. This is a going capsule with doors opening on both sides, but we also were considering inner and outer shell configuration. Also, this is more of an economy proposal where we would have 3 seats in one row. Usually the middle seat is not very desirable, so we propose to push it a little bit forward so you remove kind of the sidelines and you don't have to see your fellow passengers too much, and in a way kind of mitigate that idea of a middle seat not being the best. And here you can see the study of the capsule leaving every 30 seconds and how much that would have to be coordinated and controlled, of course, by the computer, and then final renderings of the exterior of the platform itself. And now I will show you a few images of the work that we do with my firm. So the study that we did at UCLA ended about 1.5 years ago, and currently my firm was hired to help out Hyperloop Transportation Technology on some of the proposals for applying Hyperloop in Middle East. So we were imagining what the station would look like and the capsule arriving at the platform with huge crowds that would, be kind of deployed through these capsules and movement and moving the capsules in a kind of fast speed. We also were looking into the infrastructure and how to activate the area underneath the entire system, so we don't perceive it anymore as this kind of elevated highway, dark and unpleasant, but creating activities on the ground level, as well as some of the proposals for interior of the capsule that, again, I just want to remind you that there is no windows in the capsule, so if we could create some kind of an immersive environment where we could actually experience maybe something different and different ideas for the digital windows and sitting configurations, and an idea of a standing capsule that could travel with lower speed, where you can lean over, sit, or move your seat, whether it is used or not. So that would be about it. Thank you very much.
Probably know why I was so excited to see what they do out in Los Angeles. So it's great, really great work. I'm really proud now to bring up David Lyon, who is a long-term car designer for General Motors. I started in '87, he started, I think, '88, so we both kind of come back from those days. But now he has a firm, Pocketsquare Design. He's been focusing, he was head of General Motors design in Asia Pacific for a while, and also in charge of General Motors design for interior design. And he joined some HMI experts at Ford and GM to create Pocketsquare. He really is forward-thinking in the user experience area, and so he's going to bring us back into the vehicle now to talk about design and what's possible. David?
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. You guys hear me okay? All right. So, as said, yes, I am a car designer, but really for the past, I don't know, I'll say 8 years or so, been very focused on user experience, which you probably hear a lot, and maybe you know what that means, and maybe you don't, but I'm going to help illustrate that for you this morning and talk about some of the opportunities within autonomous driving. User experience is not just what happens on the screen. It really is what happens, this bridge between people and technology. So I'll start off just by mentioning that, if you're here in this conference, you believe in the promise of autonomous driving. It's going to eliminate the human error from personal mobility, right? And all the great things that come along with that. As people, we are complex and we are flawed. Our individual perception has limitations, and technology can augment that and then eventually overcome that. If you are an engineer, you're very much focused on the hardware and the software and the system solutions. Traditional designers are very focused on vehicle packaging, let's say the vehicle design, proportions, entry egress, and so on. User experience is maybe different than this, all right? User experience is, we often find that we spend a lot of time anticipating how people are actually going to use a product, and we do testing to find out how they actually use it. And we find out all the time that how they use it is not always the same as how it was intended. That happens all the time, and it is more art than science, for sure. And I guess my point here is, our goal here is to eliminate the human error from driving, and that's great, but people are still going to be involved as passengers. In fact, it's the whole point of this exercise. So I've put together a few thoughts around some problems and opportunities in this space for this completely new experience for the flawed, unpredictable users that we all will be. Okay. So let's start by talking about this guy. All right, this is your taxi driver, Uber driver, Lyft, what have you. We're working on technology to replace him as the driver, but what else does he do besides drive the car? Well, he does a lot of things, all right? And in the interest of time, I'm not necessarily going to go through all of them, but safe to say there's a lot of interaction with the riders and making sure that the car is okay. So I'm going to talk about a few of these today because they're interesting and maybe even funny. So at the end of a ride, we generally rate his professionalism, and whether you know it or not, he's rating you as a passenger, which I think is important because, if he's not there, what happens? I mean, if we have a moment of honesty, sometimes we all make bad choices. All right, I'm going to pose a scenario for you. You and your spouse leave a fantastic new restaurant downtown, right? Heading home, great meal, perfect pairing of wine and food, wonderful evening. You summon your driverless vehicle, it pulls up, confirms your identity, and you open the door. And then it hits you, the smell. And while the all-seeing cabin camera is a great first line of defense, it may not catch every bad choice. See, that smell could be a lot of things. Not everybody who was in the car last was a rideshare subscriber. They may not have even been human. They may not even remember the ride or what they did during it. Some people have a very pragmatic view of what is appropriate to do in the car, maybe different than your view, all right? They may not be thinking about the next person at all. And they may not be feeling so great, all right? There's often a very different standard for how people treat things that they're borrowing, all right? And when no one is watching. So, cameras and microphones, I think we're assuming those are all going to be part of these vehicles. And they help replace the driver's eyes and ears. But that may not be enough. I think there's another piece of technology that is needed to replace another piece of, let's say, original equipment, the human nose, all right? But where would we turn for this kind of technology? I mean, who would be in a leadership position on this other than the French, of course? All right? They were the first to create the electronic nose. It was used in manufacturing facilities to detect dangerous odors. And now today, there's a French startup that's creating kind of an in-home electronic nose that's able to recognize up to 50 different day-to-day odors using local sensing and cloud database. This is great. We could probably survey people and ask them, what are the top 50 things you don't want to smell in your shared autonomous vehicle? That would be a fun survey. Or really, we could probably ask any municipal bus driver because these guys have seen and smelled it all. I'm not advocating denying mobility to new parents and dog lovers and the fitness-minded and drunks. I mean, they need rides too, in some cases, more than most. But the vehicle should know what it's getting into, all right? Or if an event that compromises the cleanliness of the vehicle occurs, all right? The vehicle should be able to clean itself. It should be able to know the status of how clean it is and maybe even communicate that to you, right? Offline, if you really mess the car up and it needs to go to a cleaning depot, there's going to be an extra charge there, all right? Now, another piece of useful technology, Boeing in their laboratories now use a 3-second flash of UV light to disinfect all the surfaces. So you can imagine a scenario where you summon your driverless vehicle. The one shows up and you can say, see when the last time it was cleaned, maybe even have kind of a rating of how it feels its conditions are. And for an extra $2, you could go ahead and sanitize this thing yourself, have it flash itself and get you back to 100%. And I know that later in the conference here today, we're going to talk about ways of monetizing this. There are a lot of opportunities in basic human needs for people to spend money to get the kind of experience that they want. Okay, and really if we look at how homes are, both here in America with mudrooms and most homes in Asia, where there's kind of an area for you to put your messy things, take your shoes off, we really can design the interior of these cabins to have more of that. If we can meet people halfway and give them a place to put their messy things so they're not going on the seats and elsewhere, that would be thoughtful. Okay, I'm going to switch gears here a little bit and talk about another basic human need, and that is the need to express oneself. You see, at the risk of sounding too much like a designer, your outward appearance says a lot about you. And I think we all kind of know this, how we dress, how we wear our hair, so on and so forth. If you don't agree with that, that says something about you as well. All right, and the automobile has a history of this, the old saying, you are what you drive. And so what you ride in has something to do with how you present yourself. If you bought, first of all, basic transportation needs are not necessarily what car companies are selling. They're selling a lot more than that, and their profits are tied into that image, right? A vehicle like this might say family is important, but there's a lot of messages in what you drive, intended or otherwise. It might also say I've given up being cool. The person that bought this is probably thinking I am a go anywhere, do anything kind of guy. Your interpretation might be I think global warming is a hoax. Or, I'm a very practical person, or I like dinner at 4 o'clock, right? I appreciate the finer things in life, or maybe I didn't get enough attention as a child. I will say I did get a lot of attention as a child, but I still want one of these, all right? This might say I don't like driving, or I never outgrew my little Tykes Cozy Coupe. And if you're not familiar with what that is, you should Google that because it's very funny when you look at this image. Okay, so people do use their vehicles to communicate status, right? To kind of help people understand their identities. The vehicle that you choose has been a way for you to communicate with the world, right? This is the original location-based social media, right, from back in the 50s. If this is really the first or second most expensive purchase you make, it's going to say something about you, even intentionally or otherwise. Car companies make money on this, all right? They make a lot of money on this because the vehicle really transcends more than pure transportation. So what happens when the cars are all the same or you don't own them? Will all these cars have all the glamour of delivery vehicles, right? And are the costs and profit all in dollars per mile? Is our online persona so significant that the actual physical doesn't matter anymore? Do you care what you get out of when you arrive? I have to say, when I summon an Uber and it pulls up and it's a minivan, something inside me dies a little bit. So, how can we design the autonomous vehicle for self-expression, right? Is temporary customization possible? Will people pay for it? And how much? So transparent OLEDs are under development, right? And let's see, not necessarily to replace TVs, because nobody really needs to see the wall behind their TV. This is a great practical application where these displays are actually flexible, so they could be put into a vehicle with a little bit of shape, not necessarily flat. And allows you to have see-through surfaces that can let reality in, or augment it, or block it. The glass in the vehicle could have a transparent OLED layer. So there's good opportunities here. Do you want a full unobstructed view of the world? Do you want a little bit more of a traditional view where there's glass and then maybe a tablecloth under the table? Or do you want to block yourself off from the rest of the world? I would pay for this sometimes, believe me. Do you want to know more about your world? Do you want to have it augmented? Do you want to be able to have information come up as you pass landmarks or points of interest along your way, right? Or maybe you want the world to know more about you. Is there an individual in that cloned pod, or is there? Do you want to be able to prove it? Can you put up your own skin or a live art wallpaper like this? Would you pay for it? Right? You could use it to express your political views every 4 years or so. See, we're living in the future here, guys. Let's see if they still remain friends. Or you could use your time in the car to tell the world about your fantastic business, right? I mean, it's your car. You rented it. You should be able to put up whatever you want within reason. So now I've kind of stepped in a little bit. I've introduced advertising into this. And although I instinctively know that can't be good, I also know that it's going to happen whether we want it to or not. And good or bad, it is an opportunity for the mobility service to improve their bottom line. See, you don't even have to be in the vehicle to advertise. You purchase something, you get free delivery if you're willing to let them use the vehicle as a billboard, mobile billboard, advertising what you just bought. There's opportunities with location-based advertising where, if you own a local bar or restaurant, you could have a line of vehicles ready for when the game lets out, offering subsidized or free rides to your establishment. You could even pay to advertise on any vehicle as it passed by a particular location. A lot of interesting opportunities here for commerce and the design of the vehicle to create absolutely new lines of business. So here we are now in the world where autonomous driving is not only possible, but in some limited use, it's already here. We have the technical solutions. Really, the only thing holding us back is the human element, which really has been understudied in the development of these types of vehicles. The question isn't how anymore, it's how soon. And user experience design thinking can really help. I think we're all used to seeing this kind of adoption curve for technology. There's a lot of things where the car can communicate with the rider to be able to shrink this a little bit. All right? If you have a choice of driving style, I want fastest and most efficient versus I want the absolute safest, most grandmotherly way because I don't trust any of this stuff, that might be a choice, right? The vehicle letting you know what it's going to do before it does it might be really helpful. You're making that left-hand turn, you see somebody walking in the crosswalk, are you going to have a moment of terror for them? Or is the vehicle communicating with you that I'll let you see what I see, right? I see that there's a person there. Don't worry, I got this, right? And this isn't just for the early days when we're just getting people to try this out. There are always going to be, with technology leaps, there's going to be opportunities to have to walk people through it. When we get to the point where there's areas established where there's only autonomous vehicles, we'll be able to get rid of stoplights and stop signs and watch these cars go through an intersection like plaid, just barely even slow down and miss, right? Thrilling for urban planners and engineers, terrifying for actual people. I don't mean to make it sound like engineers are not actual people. There's a lot of engineers in the room here. So if you want to think of it this way, user experience is really this bridge between people and technology, all right? And helping them both to communicate with each other and work better as a unit. In keeping up with the theme of Philip K. Dick novels and such, you guys remember Johnny Cab from the 1990 sci-fi classic Total Recall? This is not really what any of us have in mind. I think Johnny Cab was not a great user experience. I think a better kind of metaphor to look at on this is, when back in the turn of the previous century, and we started putting elevators in buildings. People didn't use them. They didn't use them because they were scared of the new technology. They just took the stairs, even though it was more difficult. Until we started putting elevator operators in. They turned the lever or pressed the button just like anybody else could, but they really became more used when there was a friendly person there that would ask them where they wanted to go and would handle it for them. All right? That's what user experience is all about. That's what it looks like when it works well. So I want to thank you for the opportunity to share some of these ideas and to expose a lot of you to user experience design. Hope you enjoy the rest of the conference.
So to break all the rules, I guess I'm a rule breaker. The moderator is now going to make a quick presentation. I worked on a project this summer, just an 8-week project that I really am excited to share with you because I talked to you about cross-disciplinary work and being a car designer and then meeting people in the city space. We did a project this summer where car designers and transportation designers worked with architects and urban designers to imagine a vision for Seoul, Korea. And this is a pretty out there vision because it's like, it requires a whole change-up of how we do transportation. So I guess you can just call it a dream. We used to do dream cars in the 1940s where we did cars that blew people's minds. Hopefully this is an idea that blows your mind a little bit, I hope so. I was working with College for Creative Studies, and I want to thank Paul Snyder, the chair of the transportation department there, and Sushin Choi, the provost that made this happen. We had 4 students in transportation, and Marta hooked us up with some graduates from UCLA, architecture and urban design. So I'm going to show you, you see Seoul, Korea. If anyone's been there, it's an enormously dense place. And actually the transportation, about 60% of it is, I'm going to show you a video, but I'm just giving you the cue right now to kind of help you see what you're going to see in the video. But down in the subway, sometimes those cars are 230% capacity, even though the cars up on the surface, 80% of them only have one person. And so there's kind of not so much an equity issue of space. And so we talked about beyond technology. If you've seen Elon Musk's rocket land in the ocean, which is phenomenal, like a human could never have done that. We're now in a time of what we think of as beyond incredible technology, including the Google self-driving cars and all of the autonomous cars, but even the PRT systems. I don't know if you know what a PRT system is. It's usually elevated, but when you get into a PRT system, it never stops. It takes you right where you want to go. So we were talking about that. And then if we move all of our cars into electric cars, like in Seoul, they're still going to be clogged. I mean, the congestion's really heavy there. So if we make all of our cars electric, they're still not moving very well. And then if you've been to Seoul too, they have 3 types of streets. They have these little alleyways, and then they have like a 2-lane streets, and then they have these main streets, which were 10 lanes across. But in 10 lanes across, there's not even a place for a bicycle. So, and the other part of this is kind of a weird image, but we talk about the future of self-driving cars and when it's going to come. Imagine if it came next year and all of our cars were autonomous. Do we want them zooming through the city at 50 miles an hour next to where kids are walking? So that image is basically talking about how dangerous it is to put people and traffic together, even if they're self-driving vehicles. And so what our proposal was to create a double-decker street. We basically, for Central Seoul, we created tunnels. I mean, we created like an upper deck to all the main wide streets throughout Seoul, which would create 10,000 square feet of new land of public space, about a $50 billion value. But you would have these bicycle and walking environments galore. And so it's a kind of a video, it's a work in progress. This was just 8 weeks worth of work, but I hope you appreciate what we did in this video, because if we were transportation planners or transportation engineers, we would have basically said, oh, well, cars are this big and vans are that big and semi-trucks are that big, and so we can't make low double-decker streets. But if you can design the vehicles over at the same time as design the city over, you could actually get that double-decker level really low. So it's not much taller than I am, and the vehicles are a little bit sunken in, but you could step into a vehicle and shoot through the city at probably 1/5 the time. So if it takes an hour to go somewhere, it might be a 10-minute trip in the system you're going to see. So this is the work in progress. It's crude for eight weeks worth of work, but I'm very proud of the work that everybody did. So after this, Kathy's going to come back up from Intel because they're sponsors of our lunch, but this is a 9-minute video. I hope you enjoy it.
We are living in a time that is overconsumed, overcrowded, and overwhelmed. Of cities with a population over 5 million, Seoul is now the 5th densest city in the world. The current transportation system in Seoul has a majority of commuters squeezing as many people as possible into subway cars and buses, with 58% of the population relying on public transportation. During peak traffic hours, nearly 70% of cars on the surface are only carrying 1 passenger, while the average subway train operates at over 230% capacity. The government is urging automakers to develop more electric cars to cut down on CO2 emissions. What about making travel cheaper, improving accessibility, or revitalizing nature? What if we could do better? What if the lifestyle of every Seoul commuter could be improved? What would that look like? Let's first imagine the experience of everyday citizens and see what they need. What if a busy executive and his assistant could be chauffeured by an autonomous vehicle? They could conduct a business on their morning trip. What would that vehicle look like? What if a grandfather, relying on a wheelchair, could once again access the city with his family? And in more comfort and privacy than a public bus. Such a vehicle could also be used for a group of college students to get around downtown. What would it look like? What if a woman who enjoys city life but misses connecting both. She could spend an afternoon in a beautiful park and simply hail a single passenger vehicle whenever she chooses to return home. What if these new efficient vehicles are part of a network? A single-seat vehicle that offers privacy and efficiency. A two-seater self-balancing vehicle that offers a personal or business environment. A six-seater vehicle that is handicap accessible and perfect for families, groups, networking, or cheap public transit. Imagine this network of smart, automated pods replacing all of the slow-moving surface traffic. They operate below an easily accessible parkway that brings nature back to the city and freedom to walk, jog, skate, and bike as you please. Introducing the Double Street, a possibility not as far in the future as it might seem. All vehicles within the Double Street tunnel travel in orchestrated, autonomous movement. Stairs and ramps provide easy access to the upper park and lower level of this system, with room for shopping, vending, and information kiosks between passenger entrance stations. Best of all, we can give back space to nature. And the more harmonious the solution, the more we will all benefit. In this time of shortages and scarcity, shouldn't our efforts be to preserve what we already have? And make a bold and innovative step that addresses pollution, congestion, and quality of life? Instead of taking every step in a different direction, let's take 2 steps in one. Let's double our motivation to preserve, to lift up, and to surpass expectations. Let's double.
Okay, it's on. I know better than to get between lunch and a room full of people, so don't worry. I don't have any slides. All I wanted to say, just on behalf of Intel, we are hosting the lunch today, so hopefully you can all stay and join. There's going to be a ton of good speeches still and panels this afternoon, so nobody sneak out. Intel's really excited. We've actually been in the automotive space for years and years and years. Traditionally more on the infotainment side, but in the last several years really getting into more of the active safety and automated driving space. So anyway, it's a pleasure to be a part of this event, and enjoy your lunch. Thanks.